You've reached Conversation with Mr. A. This is your host, Anthony Apostilla. Thank you for listening. Let's get right to the episode. Welcome to another edition of Conversations with Mr. A. This is your host, Anthony Apostilla. So for this episode, once again, I have Pastor Jeff Adams. If you remember, he was back in episode 29, where he was a prison chaplain. Now he's a transportation director. So to start off with, Jeff, thank you for being here.
Of course, I'm glad to be here.
So back in episode 29, just like I said, you were working as a prison chaplain. Now you're working as a transportation director for the Yelm School District. How did the change come about?
Well, I believe God's hand was in it because I drove a school bus for Yelm for 8 years plus years back before I was a prison chaplain for the state of Washington. And while I was doing that, it was my favorite job I'd ever done. And I was a mentor driver to all the new drivers coming on. So I was basically coaching them in student management while driving the bus. So it was one of the last pieces of our training. So most of the new drivers knew me. And then things with the national bus driver shortage, things fell apart for Yelm. They were kind of late to the game. Other districts had already had incredible shortages, but Yelm was late to the game. So after everybody else was having shortages and cancellations, bus route cancellations, everything kind of unraveled in the transportation department. They lost their director, they lost their assistant director, they lost their router, and so there was just chaos. It was horrible, and the community was complaining about the inability to serve them because they couldn't transport kids. So I started having people reach out to me while I was while things were going very well as a chaplain in the state. So people started reaching out to me saying, we need you. And I started saying, I don't want to leave what I'm doing. I mean, it's a rather glamorous thing to be a chaplain, and especially be one of the respected chaplains in the state. So I didn't want to leave. We had a church of 600 inside our prison of 1,900 plus people. And I had just baptized 55 of them in one day while I'm interviewing for this job in Yelm. And I got a clear understanding from God on this, because as I began talking with more and more people and interviewing, going through the second interview and all of that, I could tell that they had a lot of hope in the fact that I was considering coming back and helping as a director. And it felt like, okay, I can move out of a very glorified position where a lot of people think very highly of me and go into a position where the community is pretty much going to hate me while I try to fix things and deal with a bunch of beat down drivers. But they thought there was hope in the fact that I might come back, and I felt God led me back there. That's why I'm doing that. Yeah.
What exactly is your role as the transportation director at the Yelm School District?
There's about 90 people in our staff right now, and my role is to make sure that the main goal is to transport students safely to and from school. And that wasn't happening very well. Now it's happening a lot better. And along with that comes, subcategories of goals. And some of that includes morale and building trust with the community and that sort of thing. So right now, morale is up high. We are starting to build more trust with the community because we're not having as many cancellations. And we're just putting things back together and having a more smooth operation. But I'm hoping that my character from my faith, my aim for excellence every day, I'm hoping that that's what they see. It's from my faith. But what's happening is it's becoming contagious. All the drivers, all the office staff, everybody, the mechanics, everybody's stepping it up again and again and again. They're aiming higher. My trainers, even the new people, they're stepping it up in their efforts to aim for excellence. It's contagious, and I hope that others see that if I'm part of that catalyst, it's because I am a Christian.
What are some of the rewards and challenges that you encounter in your position?
Well, one of them is because we now live after COVID, especially, but even before COVID, it was starting, is the lack of accountability and responsibility in our communities. We've kind of handcuffed our law enforcement in a lot of ways from actually enforcing the law. We've basically done a whole lot of things in parenting all over, where we don't set expectations for behaviors. A lot of families don't do that at all. Just give them a tablet, and or put them in front of the TV or whatever it is, and have them mind numbed, if you want to call it that, just playing video games and whatever. And so they don't go outside much, and they don't have much expectation, and there's no responsibility or accountability. When students, it used to be, when I drove before, there was an expectation that you have to behave. There's rules to follow. But now there's every kind of excuse under the sun that, why a kid should be allowed to continue to misbehave. We just don't enforce rules like we used to. We don't encourage better behavior. We don't set expectations. One of the things I see the most is a common thread. Like I've noticed, there are particular teachers who don't expect their own children to behave. So they have their behavior problems in the school and on the bus. And then they are handed students, and they don't expect their students to behave. And so I've noticed there's a clear pattern. If a teacher doesn't expect their own children to behave at home or on the bus or at school, they also don't expect their students in the classroom to behave in the classroom. So not setting expectations is rampant, which is what I also saw in the prisons. The majority of what you see in prisons is people who were not given clear expectations. They didn't have a father figure or whatever the problem was. And there was no accountability and no responsibility until suddenly they find themselves caught and incarcerated.
We mentioned some of the students, the behavioral problems. I'm just curious, what are some of the behavioral problems that you might have observed or seen or heard?
Bullying is a big one. Even though we've had a nationwide effort to stop bullying, it continues. And the reason for that is because we're not setting expectations and we're not having responsibility and accountability. So students will bully other students, but if there's no accountability, if, whatever the excuse is, whether they have an IEP or they have some sort of a special need or they're medicated, that becomes then an excuse that, hey, doesn't matter, or we don't say it doesn't matter. We still try to help them make better decisions. But the difficulty is we kind of have to handle it more with kid gloves in the sense that, well, they have an IEP or they have a special need or they have this. So then it's almost like we're justifying the bullying. Like, well, wait a minute, it's still not okay to bully. I mean, we still can't accept these behaviors. Doesn't matter if you're medicated. Doesn't matter if you have an IEP. We have one of the problems that I'm seeing that I'm shocked sometimes is that we continue to have our bus drivers hit, spat on, kicked, things thrown at them while they're driving down the road. And this, is like, okay, well, we need to have an IEP meeting. Okay. Meanwhile, we got to stop the behavior. If you suspend them from the bus and, that's going to create a hardship for mom. Okay. But if we keep them on the bus, we're going to have an accident, or we're going to have an injured driver, or we're going to be transferring body fluids and then we're going to have lawsuits. These kinds of things is like we just don't teach accountability and responsibility. We come up with all kinds of excuses for why it's okay to do these bad behaviors. And that's what we just keep. It's a vicious cycle, and we're just enabling people to continue this kind of behavior. Like the parents that call the school and say, my child would never. And instead of actually, hey, talk to your child. Did you do this? And sometimes we even show them video where their child is doing that very thing, and then they come up with some excuse as to, well, I heard this kid did this to my child another day. Well, where's the video for that? Why didn't you complain about that? When a driver gets on to their child, frequently parents will then come to me and talk about how bad the driver is, how the driver is they're always talking down to the students, or they're yelling at the students on the bus. Like, okay, when? Because I can pull video and I can see this. Or how about this? Why are you now complaining about how bad the driver is when you never complained until your kid got in trouble? Mm-hmm. Once again, responsibility and accountability, we come up with excuses. So those are some of the issues that I'm seeing.
And here's a question. The balance between, the accountability is very important and responsibility is important. How do you balance that with customer service? Because I would imagine you must come across some families or individuals that might be a little bit difficult.
Yes. So as a driver for 8 years plus, what I did was I set clear expectations, and everybody understood that. And that's why everybody ran through my bus as a driver. All the new drivers had to go through my bus, because what they got to witness was a bus that was always calm and was always felt safe to every student on the bus. It didn't matter if you're, what color your skin is. Didn't matter if you're a transgendered individual. Didn't matter what was going on with that student on my bus. Any student, nobody is unkind to anyone else on my bus. Everyone on this bus will be respectful of everyone. There will not be any toxic behaviors on my bus. That was understood by everyone. And when you set those clear expectations, the phone calls go a lot better when you talk to parents and say, we don't do this on our bus, because I would never let this happen to your child. So we can't let your child do this to others. So I'm just giving you a courtesy phone call before we start down the path of enforcing the rules more. I want to give you as a parent an opportunity to talk to your child about this, so we don't have to intervene. And almost 100% of the time, the parents would get involved because they didn't want consequences, and they didn't want the behavior to continue either. So if you set clear expectations, even if there's none at home, you're setting them on your bus. And what I found was many times for some kids, the bus was the safest place for them. Safer than school, safer than home. And if you can have that bubble, even for less than an hour a day on the bus, that helps that child get through life. I felt good about it. That's why it was my favorite job.
Wow. Yeah. Now, with your current position, of course, you deal with the families. Do you still deal with the students on occasions? Work with your current position?
Yes, on a regular basis. So, for instance, let me give you the last day at school. So the last day of school, where was I? I was while school was getting out on Friday afternoon, I was not behind my desk at the transportation department. I was at 2 different schools that afternoon to help be a presence, to help encourage and support drivers as needed, because that's what I do. So if a driver tells me that we're having issues before the students get on the bus, they get really ramped up and they're getting really wild. And by the time I get them, I can't get them calmed down. So I can go and I can talk to them and say, look, I'm a bus driver, a supervisor, and I want you to know that you're on my radar because you're kind of getting ramped up, and that's a distraction while your driver's driving. And that makes it unsafe for them to drive while you're doing that. So what I need you to do is take it down a few notches. Keep the volume level down, keep your hands to yourself, stay out of the aisle, obey all the rules, and let's just help the driver have a good, safe ride. Let's not be a distraction and help other students not be a distraction. Then you're going to have a good bus ride home, and you won't have to deal with me anymore.
That makes sense.
That's what I do.
That makes sense. One of the things that I really respect about you is you have the jobs that you've been doing, transportation director. You also are a pastor, and the commute distance, the travel is quite a bit long. How do you deal with it?
I like audiobooks, and I like prayer, and I like to troubleshoot. A lot of times in my commuting, I'm getting phone calls with my staff, though, telling me whether, if they're calling out or things like that. But I will deal with phone calls if I have to do any type of work while I drive. I'll do that with my Bluetooth device. But I like to listen to audiobooks so that I'm learning as I drive as well.
Okay. Okay, so we've done this before with the last interview, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the same game called word association. I'll give a
Okay.
few words and just tell me the
Cool.
first thing that comes to mind.
All right.
Difficult individuals.
Equanimity.
Okay. Teenagers.
Expectations.
Okay. Fast and the Furious.
Fun.
Okay. Sports cars.
Fun.
Okay. Mean Girls.
It happens.
Okay. Bullying.
Unfortunate.
Okay. Politics.
It's part of life.
Okay. Bus drivers.
Loyal, dedicated, unique, and not everybody can do it.
Okay. Elementary schools.
Great place for learning.
Middle schools.
Also a great place for learning and socializing.
Okay. High schools.
I think people are coming out of their shells more and learning adulthood while they're in high school, learning a little bit about it.
Okay. Respect and accountability.
I think that if more of us would teach this and show respect to others and be willing to accept responsibility and accountability, our world would be a better place.
Okay, awesome. Now, before I get to the last question, there was one thing I was going to ask you about. You mentioned very early in the interview the aim for excellence. Can you kind of explain a little bit what you mean or what you're thinking about when you say aiming for excellence?
Yeah, I think that we live in a world now where pretty much everybody just says, well, I did my best, even if they didn't, even if they halfway tried, even if they woke up late and barely, got up in time to do whatever they needed to do and really didn't give their all, and really weren't at their best. They didn't get a full night's rest, didn't eat properly, didn't prepare for whatever it is they're trying to tackle. Then they still say, well, I did my best. Or some people will even tell their friends, well, you did your best. Well, how do you know that? I don't always do my best, but I want to try. But aiming for excellence, I believe that my faith is that I believe my God of the Bible is pleased with me when I do everything to please Him. And I believe that requires me to do my best, not just say I do my best, but actually do my best. And then the next time, try to do even better and try to do better, learn how to do it better and improve. Never get comfortable with where you are. Always learn how to do better and better and better. And if I can aim for excellence, I think that if people will see that, and it actually can become a contagious thing in a good way, where others will see, I can do this too. I'm watching it happen. I watched it happen while I was at Clallam Bay with my staff. I even got to teach a leadership class when I, as the chaplain, was not a leader of the leaders officially, but I was seen that way. So I got to teach a leadership class to all the leaders. I go to Stafford Creek, and I get to aim for excellence, and it became clear we had a full-on revival there, and I watch people that are incarcerated aim for better and aim for excellence, and it's a wonderful thing to watch. I think it's contagious. When you set the tone in your life purposely, you help others set the tone in their lives.
Oh, well said, well said. Any final words you'd like to tell our listeners?
No, I appreciate what you're doing. I think asking the questions you ask will maybe be insightful to people who don't know the world of chaplaincy and school administration and how that might work together.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And that concludes this edition of Conversations with Mr. A with Jeff Adams, Transportation Director. So it's quite a transition from prison chaplain to a transportation director for the Yelm School District. One of the good things about with this interview, Jeff talks about how he's transitioned working with families and students and working with youth. And so much appreciated. Thank you, Jeff, for your time with the interview. We will have more future edition of Conversations with Mr. A. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.